This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to talk about the fourth episode of It is Andor, of course. When you're on Coffee with Kenobi, the episode is Aldhani, and we've got two amazing guest hosts with us tonight. First, let's bring in from Talking Toys, Marvin Dog Media, and so many other things that there's really just not enough bandwidth to get to all of his podcasts. Jeff McGee.
Hello. I refuse to call it Andor. I am going to henceforth refer to it as Andor.
I like that too.
Stellan Skarsgård is the coolest man on the planet, and I want to be just like him. So it's Andor.
I don't blame you one bit. The other person joining the show, I don't think he's been on the main show for a while, but when you hear that laugh, you know it is Mr. Tom Gross. What's up, Tom?
Well, hello. Well, not much. Got some Andor to talk about, but I was thinking last time I was on the show was sometime like a couple episodes before Obi-Wan ended. So,
oh wow,
it's been a while. Glad to be here.
The people have been clamoring, pitchforks and violent mobs, wondering where have you been, because you normally do the regular shows, but life has a way of presenting challenges, and family first, as we say.
Indeed it does.
Indeed it does.
Indeed it does. But happy to be here tonight.
Yeah, it's great to have you both. Gentlemen, before we get into this specific episode of Andor, I want to talk, I almost did it. I want to hear both of your just sort of reactions to the first four episodes overall, and how you're feeling about it so far. Jeff, let's start with you.
Well, so the first three episodes I watched obviously all in one sitting because you kind of have to. I enjoyed them, but I did think that three episodes could have been one extended episode. It could have been like a standard pilot episode. I said the name of one of my podcasts. I really enjoy it, but it did seem like there was a lot of filler especially in the first two episodes. When it finished, my thought was, okay, now the series has started, and I shouldn't be thinking that 2 hours in. But again, I know people who play video games for 8 hours before they get to the opening credit sequence or whatever, so I guess it's not a big deal. But all that is to say that I am very much enjoying the series, and this episode, which we'll get into, really did solidify my enjoyment and my love for the series so far. I do very much enjoy the world building that they're doing. It just seemed odd to do all that world building and then leave that world behind, which maybe we're coming back. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I'm sold. I'm all in, but I'm also not going to sit here and say that it's perfect.
Okay, fair enough. Tom, what about you? Overall, just reactions, not to this episode, but just the series overall. I know you were really excited about this one.
I was, and Jeff, points well taken on the filler things. My take is a little different on that, and that is that I think those three episodes made me care about the ending of episode 3. I think it was all build up to give me connection to all these people that know Andor and sort of help shape him, and then we get the flashbacks to his upbringing in like kind of Lord of the Flies tribal sort of feel. And so I agree that it seemed like none of that really made sense to me why they're dropping 3 episodes, and the pain of being a busy person and trying to find time, because I felt like they were intended to be watched together in a binge kind of feel. But being the person that I am, I guess, and I would guess a lot of people were like this, where I had to kind of watch them individually. And then I forced myself late one night to watch them all together because it wasn't connecting with me. But when I sat down to watch them all together, the ending, and Dan, I mentioned this to you at work, and that was, I felt exhausted, and I don't think it had anything to do with watching it late at night, but I felt emotionally exhausted at the end of episode 3. And the only way that worked for me is if I had buy-in on who these people were and that they mattered. They mattered to Cassian and his story. And so I feel like that's why they did that. Otherwise, individually, they were sort of ho-hum episodes, and felt like maybe they should have been scrunched into one just to give us that backstory. But I feel like it was intended for that deeper feeling. So thoroughly enjoyed that when I concluded that, and it made me sit back and just kind of like, oh, I'm so tired emotionally. And I was like, holy cow, what did I just witness? But Jeff, you're right. It was at the point I'm like, okay, all right, origin story done. I'm ready for some Andor. So I'm not sure what that means, but I'm good. I'm in on it.
Well, and you're exactly. I'm sorry, Dan. I just wanted to mention one thing.
Sure.
Based on one thing Tom was saying. You watched the first episode and it didn't really do much for you. I have a very good friend who watched that first episode and he said, "I'm not sure if I'm going to continue if this is what the series is going to be because he got nothing out of it." And I think there is something to be said for that. But again, my point to him was there's a reason they dropped them all at once, and I haven't spoken to him about it since. I'm hoping that he went back and watched the rest of it. But yeah, you're exactly. Yeah, you said basically what I was trying to say in a much more eloquent way than I did. So thank you for that.
I heard a lot of similar stuff from a lot of people some of them are really ensconced in Star Wars in professional ways, and some of them were saying similar, like, yeah, this isn't for me. But I encourage them to stick with it, and I feel like episodes 3 and 4 really sort of showcase that. For me, my biggest challenge, and I was very clear on this on the live show this week and then last week when we reviewed the first 3 episodes, I think it's a fantastic, well-executed series. But the one thing that I lament more than anything else is that I can't watch it with my little guy because there's a number of things that happen that are very adult and mature, and certainly not how I define or have defined in the past Star Wars. And that was the big question that we asked at the end of last episode: is this Star Wars? And my immediate reaction was, of course it is, because they've told us it is. It's just different than what we've seen before. And that leads me to episode 4. Episode 4 is called Aldhani. We'll go in reverse order this time and start with you, Tom, and then Jeff, and then I'll be the caboose. Tom, give me a letter grade for Aldhani and overall reactions to it.
I give Aldhani an A. I felt like this is, I don't know, this is what I've kind of been waiting for, and we've seen this model in animation, I feel, but this is the first time we're really seeing it in live action, gritty feel. This is the birth of the rebellion. We're seeing the early factions and sort of the pushback of this empire that is taking over. I mean, we literally see them take over the corporate security and the corporate sort of structure of systems or worlds. And so I loved that, and I give that an A for that reason. It continues this theme that has been rich throughout all of Star Wars, and that is the nature / versus technology, and which I thoroughly enjoy, and I'm enjoying more and more. It's part of the reasons why this Age of the Empire is my favorite, because it's so clear, the destruction versus the I guess grassroots or whatever you want to call it. And then speaking of the Empire, I really am enjoying this sort of, we get to see the early organization and sort of the jockeying for position of leaders and influence on a galactic scale. And so it's all coming together for me. I mean, not a ton of action, but I'm not hanging on to action in these Disney Plus series. I'm looking for depth and story. And so this one works for me in A.
Jeff, what about you?
I would give it an A-, and the only reason I won't give it an A, I'll get into in just a second. But I'm with Tom. The lack of action never bothers me. Star Wars has always been about the characters for me, anyway. I loved that the show is becoming an ensemble, which I didn't expect. It's called Andor. So I was expecting him to be front and center and everything. And the reason I'm giving it an A- instead of an A is because thus far, he's not been a very proactive character. Everything is happening to him or around him. And I understand that part of this is his origin story and him learning to be who we meet him as in Rogue One. But it would be nice if he wasn't just a bystander with everything that's happening. And ideally, it sounds like the next episode that will change. But I did love, Tom mentioned the juxtaposition between sort of the wilderness. I love the juxtaposition of the wilderness, the green fields that the group was meeting in near the end of the episode, clashing with the stark, sterile white of everything on Coruscant, especially the Imperial venues that we saw. But Coruscant, in general as well. Even Mon Mothma's home was very white, very sterile, very sort of cold. And I think that just says a lot about who these characters are. The production design in this episode, production design so far has been great, but this episode in particular, for some reason, I was just really caught by the set design, and it especially Mon Mothma's car, that blue.
Nice, yes.
Pam said it looks like the Bluesmobile. The Blues Brothers car. That's just what it reminded her of, and I couldn't argue. But it was just great. And the only reason I'm going to give it an A- is, like I said, because Cassian has just sort of been a bystander in his own story. But I love all of the new characters we're getting, and I love that they're not all, even the quote unquote good guys, are not that likable. And I like that we don't really know where Luthen, that's Stellan Skarsgård's character, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We don't really know enough about him to know if we should really trust him altogether. I feel like we should, but I'm still not sure I know exactly, what his limits are, and I like that.
That's cool.
Good call.
This is great. The reason I want to give this episode an A+. I think it's outstanding. This entire series, and I mentioned the thing that challenges me, but as an adult viewer, as someone who loves analytical, thought-provoking works, and this is an art piece. It's like a Tolstoy novel. It's like something from the Russian Revolution. All 4 episodes together. It's a very, very slow burn with some interactions and conversations and characters that seemingly don't have purpose, but when they pay off in profound, intricate ways that you wouldn't even expect. This is like actual literature, an actual work of art. And this 4th episode really showcases that because of so much duality between many of the major characters. Luthen, I think Skarsgård, I said this before, is an absolute show stealer. He's my favorite character in the series, and it's not even close. Cassian is interesting because I feel like Diego Luna chews up a lot of scenery, but when I interviewed him, I almost said, "Hey, it's good to see you actually smile for once," because Cassian never does. But I didn't do it because I only had one question. I didn't want to waste it. I like that he's not particularly likable. Like if I knew what this character was like only through 4 episodes, and you told me there would be a series based around him, I'd be like, if not for the show, I'd probably skip it. But I'm glad that's not the case, because I don't think that Cassian likes himself all that much. So again, the fact that we get to mirror that is terrific. There's some wonderful sequences with Cyril, who is very much demoted, and we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of where he is with that, plus all the stuff with the ISB, and then the major suspense that's built throughout this thing, and I think you've got a borderline masterpiece episode.
I like it.
Yeah, super cool. So let's talk about it. They've left Primor, or the world, not Primor, but they've left Fix, right? And that's the name of the planet, Fix?
I'm having trouble keeping track, I'll be honest.
I don't know.
They're all new. Ferrix. No, I was combining Ferrix with
It
Fix.
is Ferrix, because I kept thinking they were saying Ferric, like Dank Ferric.
Yes.
And that's exactly right.
I was combining Ferrix with Bix, who's the character who loses her love Tim in the 2nd episode, or 3rd episode, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so they leave Ferrix, and right away we get this really powerful sort of 8-minute. It's not a monologue, but it's very much almost like 2 monologues side by side between Cassian and Luthen together, and it's basically Luthen's last, are you in or out speech. Tom, what stands out to you about this conversation between these two?
Well, first of all, to me, it's we know where he's headed. That's what's cool about this. And Dan, to your point on Cassian's not likable, I didn't think he was very likable a lot of times in Rogue One. So, and that also ties into something I was going to say about what Jeff said. That we'll go back to your question, Dan. Is Jeff, you said that we're not even sure that we like the rebels, but historically they're troublemakers. When you think
Right.
about the Revolutionary War, they're just a bunch of vagabonds.
Mhm.
And probably at the time, most people saw them as troublemakers. And so I feel the same way. And when he goes to the group, eventually I'm like, yeah, I don't know that I like these people either. They're super suspicious and they're not willing to give anything and whatnot. But to your point on your question on the conversation between Luthen and Cassian, first of all, the first thing that came to mind was, he's resisting the call to do something and do something that we know eventually. Was that called dramatic irony or I forget which, but
it's dramatic
yeah.
irony.
And so we know the calling is righteous and it's good, but he's pushing back on it. But what we get is a fabulous just richness of Star Wars history and lore, because he talks about he was part of he was in the Imperial Academy, at least this is what I caught, and he battled in the same planet that Han Solo battled on, Mimbian.
On Mimban, yeah.
Mimban. Right. And like what I love about that is my brain can attach to that because I've seen the movie Solo. And so it validates so many things that we know. And I love that. I love how every layer of Star Wars, and that's one of the things these Disney Plus shows are doing, is just adding layers to the lore. I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi did that in its own story. And so we have that, but I think that what story-wise we take from that conversation is just his pushback and his reasoning behind his pushback. And it also shows us the character of Cassian that we see throughout. He's always questioning, but making the choice to do the right thing. The other thing I thought was interesting from that conversation was Cassian started out as a mercenary. I don't even know that he intended for that, but it just happened that way. And it goes back to Luthen's character. Who is this guy? I think I love that he's your favorite character, Dan. I don't know. He's up there for me. I love Cassian so much that I'm buying into his story before it's really his. But I'm with you. Luthen is such a cool character, but there's so much mystery surrounding him that how could we not like him?
Yeah, I'm going to chime in there. Luthen is easily my favorite character so far, and I'll tell you what did it was watching him put the wig on and then slip into that merchant character. As soon as he did that, I said, "Okay, I'm in. This guy I'll go along on any adventure this guy wants to take me on."
I completely agree with that. We'll certainly get to that. But how would you define, Jeff, sort of his method of persuasion? Because if he's an Imperialist, like you hold a blaster to Cassian and say, you do this or you're done, or you bring in Darth Vader or something like that. Although Cassian wouldn't be worth the Darth Vader at this point in his career. But yeah, Luthen knows a lot about his background. Clearly unsettles Cassian, but I also feel like he it sort of appreciates it too.
I think, and I believe, if I heard this correctly, he talked about being on Mimban, and Luthen kind of undercut him and said, "Well, you were a cook. You were there for 6 months. You came in as a cook, and you survived because you ran away." Mm-hmm. Was that accurate, or was that just his supposition of what had happened? Do you think?
Well, Cassian didn't push back.
That's what I thought. Yeah, based on Cassian's reaction, I assumed that was the truth. And I think the way he played on him was he played on his shame at doing that, as well as what did he say? He said better to spit in their food than.
Oh, that's what he said in the last episode. Yeah, there he says, "Would you rather?" Let me see, what is the exact thing he says? I actually got it pulled up right here. He says, "What I'm asking is this: wouldn't you rather give it all at once to something real, This is like his last pitch. Then carve off useless pieces until there's nothing left.
That was it. Yeah. And give something real, tells you everything that's going to happen. That's what happens in Rogue One.
Mm-hmm.
Is he gives everything he has for something real. So, like I said, I think it was basically saying, look, this is up to you. This is what you can do. This is what I need you to do. I didn't come here for this machine. I came here for you. You can make a difference, but you have to want it. And I think it was just the fact that he came across as very take it or leave it. I don't care what you do. Everything's going to happen whether you come along or not, but it'll be a heck of a lot easier with you, and you'll feel a heck of a lot better about yourself if you do. And I think that's the right tact. And I think he just, like you said, he seems to know him and he seems to read him really well. And I think that's what it is rather than forcing him, he just pushes the buttons that he knows are already there to be pushed.
Right, and then he offers him 200,000 credits. And after watching only 4 episodes, I'm not entirely sure why that is. Later, we see that it is a bit of an odd thing. Gosh, we're only gotten to the first like 5 or 6 minutes of this episode. We're already almost to our break. Tom, we get to see the ISB in person. During trailers, I think someone thought this was going to be the Imperial Senate, but no, this is very much not that. This is a Partagaz, Partagaz. That is apparently is the ISB person who's in charge of this little organization. But some interesting conversations here. It's almost like a constant chess between all of them. Not only you can tell why they're so good at hunting down the rebels or this burgeoning rebellion, but they're very they undercut one another. They're very patronizing. It's an interesting little intriguing set of people, I think.
Oh yeah, it's back to what I was saying in the intro. Is this is part of what's fun about watching this part of the Empire, is they are as cutthroat with themselves as they are with their enemies, and I'm glad you struggled with that because I can't say the name either. Major Partagaz or something like that.
Yeah, they say it quickly and I kind of miss it.
Yeah, but it rolls off a lot better than what I'm saying. I'm putting too many syllables in it, I think. Anyway, he is amazingly curt and very petty
yes.
and merciless. And I couldn't help but thinking, he is cut from the same cloth as a Tarkin, or Rogue One, Krennic. I mean, they all are just so conniving, and it really brings light to that, to the bickering and the battling between Krennic and Tarkin. But now we go back, a few years, and this is the guy that's in charge, and he's so conniving with that one guy who says, "Well, my guys, said this," and then he just makes some sarcastic comment and lectures about what do we do here, and then our new hero or new heroic. No, the new supervisor. I love that they're all supervisors. I never would have thought of it that way. That's the new kind of terminology. But she gives the textbook, and he's like, "No, that's not right. That's what's in the textbook, and this is what we really are."
And you're talking about Daedra. That is the
Daedra.
Yeah, you can tell she's a focal point.
Yep. And but then he totally dismisses that guy, and says, "You'll be reassigned. Don't worry." And it is very much that way, the way you would expect from the early Empire, and cutthroat, very Vader-esque in power, but not in violence. And that stark white that you mentioned, Jeff, is just so, I don't know, cold and uncomfortable. Just what you would expect from the Empire. Yep.
Unforgiving. It's very unforgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No room for critical thinking. No room for
no, not there.
Anything that's not exactly what they want when they want it. They even ignore their own textbook, which I would imagine would be quite challenging. Then we flash back to Luthen. He meets Vel, a new character for this episode. Jeff, what are your impressions of her? Let's just not talk about when she first appears, but maybe throughout the entire episode. How does Vel work for you?
I think she's a very interesting character because she at first she doesn't want to have anything to do with this, and he talks her into what's going on, and the way she handles her crew once they get back is just amazing to me. And you can tell you get the feeling she cares about everyone, but she cares about the mission more than anything else. And I think we see that in Rogue One even. And this is a character to watch. I think she's going to be extremely interesting. I hope she survives the series because this is a character I would love to see more of. But as a leader of this crew, she obviously commands their respect. But the fact that she is worried about what they're going to say tells me she knows her crew, and the fact that they all, almost to a man, react the way she expects them to tells you everything you need to know about what kind of leader she is. And she has the last line of the episode. She says, finish your food, let the other woman patch up your arm, and then have that all memorized by daybreak, and that's it.
Yeah,
and I love this character. She's just so no nonsense, but there's not a lot of warmth there. But at the same time, she doesn't feel cold somehow.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's her eyes. The acting throughout this entire thing is just ridiculously good. I mean, it's just another level, very much so. And I like seeing that because there was a time, when we were in our 20s, where people didn't say that about Star Wars. We definitely changed the course of things here. So let's talk about Cyril. Cyril Karn is very much he's been demoted. Punished probably isn't a good enough word. He's been demoted. It appears he's lost kind of his way with the because he was the deputy inspector on Primor, and now he's nothing. He's basically been cast out, or at least it seems that way. He takes his little suitcases. He goes home. He goes to his mom, and she slaps him. And then she hugs him full of tears. And we don't really see much, but I don't think we've seen the last of Cyril. Tom, I think he's one of the more interesting characters in this series as well, because we've got some dimensions. He's not just a mustache twitching bad guy, but he's clearly, and I think we said this at school, he subscribes to all the Imperial propaganda, and now he's been humbled by them too.
He's amazingly fascinating. And I thought the handling of his character in this episode was just masterful, because it's not overdone. It's just perfect. It's dismissive by the Empire. And we saw that he really, at least I felt like in the first 3 episodes, I felt like he was extremely capable. And even though, he buys into the Imperial propaganda, like you said, and all that. And I felt like he was quite capable, but just was outdone by someone much, much better than him in Luthen. And so he gets the raw end of the deal here by the Empire and gets put in his, I don't even know if it's put in his place, but he just is given the business. And I thought, I don't know, I really felt quite bad for him. It was very sad watching him walk with his suitcases. And I did kind of wonder, like, what are we following here? So to your point of, you don't think we've seen the end of it, I don't know how we could possibly have seen the end of him. Because otherwise we just see him demoted and he's done. We never see him again, but we see this next step where he goes to his mother, and you're right, 1000% humbled. And so he will rise up, I've no doubt, in some fashion. I do wonder, there are two, it's Star Wars, so one of 2 ways he will rise up, and that will either be with the Empire, or he'll sympathize with what has happened to him and go the rebellion. And so I don't know which way that's going to be, and I don't even want to try to speculate, because he's in the dumps now, and I can't wait to see where that goes.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is Tolstoy. This whole series is Tolstoy, and I didn't think about that until we started talking tonight. But that's exactly kind of how it plays out. Once Vel and Cassian start walking on this very, very long walk, there's a sequence in this where the TIE fighters lurch overhead, and it's almost felt like a horror film. The way that they run for cover
scared the heck out of me.
Yeah, when you got the surround sound on, Jeff, feel free to break down that scene. You are, of the three of us, you are by far the expert on when it comes to theater and production. Talk to me about why that's so effective.
Well, it's effective because it's the first time we've seen we've seen TIE fighters in The Mandalorian and everything, but it's the first time the TIE fighters basically act like Jaws in that scene. They come from out of nowhere. She hears them coming, but we don't really know what's going on, and it happens so quickly. And then when they just appear, the sound is so deafening because they're so close, and they just look huge. They look even bigger than they ordinarily would. I don't know how they did that with it must just be the angle, but they do. They just kind of appear from out of nowhere. They're like a slasher in a slasher film that just appears. You've got that jolt of sound, that jump scare that you always get, and the reaction of the characters. You know, when Vel gets scared, we get scared because she seems pretty unflappable. And so, and again, that's why the character is pretty perfectly written and pretty perfectly cast, because she's our lifeline, and as long as she's okay, we're okay. But when she gets nervous, we're all going to get nervous, and I think that's what happened there. She served as the da-na, da-na from the John Williams Jaws score in that sequence, that we knew the shark was present, and then the shark appeared from out of nowhere, and that's the best way I can describe it. But it really did. It jolted me, and I got legit scared for them, and kind of scared for myself as well, because you realize the Empire is omnipresent, and we don't have any rebels around here to save our skins.
And isn't it great that they've gone out of their way to show how hardened and tough and merciless Cassian can be? But two TIE fighters show up, and they're scared to death, and rightfully so. And I think it's kind of neat because, you know, over the years, you know, stormtroopers are bad shots and blah, 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 and all these kind of cliche jokes that really kind of undermine the verisimilitude of, if they're good shots and we have maybe 5 minutes of Star Wars, then we're not having a podcast. So they have to be bad shots in the earlier films. But now they're played very much from a place of, this is dangerous. These are lethal and faceless. We don't see TIE fighter pilots. We barely even see the TIE at all, but the way that the reactions we get is visceral, and I think the Jaws comparison is really quite apt. Tom, I wanted to ask you, maybe it's pretty obvious because they're just worried about who they can trust and there's spies everywhere, but why is everyone, why does Luthen not want everyone to know about Cassian? Why do they keep things from each other? Why does this new band that we meet, this new cast of characters, why all the secrecy?
Because I feel like it's because secrecy is, you know, it still goes back to the World War II, loose lips sink ships. And so everything has to be held tight to the chest, because any little slip means the end of them. And so the suspicion, and I think it goes back also to the conversation we just had about the TIE fighters. You know, and that's what I've loved about Rogue One and now the Andor series, is it brings legitimacy to the rest of the Star Wars saga, because, like you said, Dan, there's the jokes about, oh, they're the best shots, but they're really not. And TIE fighters seem so expendable in Star Wars and Empire and Return of the Jedi. They're just, they're a dime a dozen. This brings legitimacy to them. And so the secrecy is, there's real danger and there's real death. And so everybody is on edge. Everybody is keeping something to themselves, because if the wrong thing is said to the wrong person, it's over. I mean, even Mon Mothma, here is somebody in the safety of Coruscant, who is at one time a highly respected senator. She is the same way. With Luthen's, and I don't know which is his alias, whether it's the merchant or whom we see with Cassian. I suspect it's the merchant is the alias. But even there, we don't know who your driver is. And she says, I don't know who anybody is. All the bankers are different. All of my aides are different. And she said, and what's the word? She says, I feel so
exposed. What did she say?
Well,
It's words to that effect, but I know, yeah.
But so I think it's all of that this is the rebellion and this is the beginning. They don't have, you said, where are the rebels to save us? There are no rebels. And so everything has to be on edge, on edge to the point of frustration from all of them. Otherwise, it's all over. So I think that's why.
So what we need to do now is let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, I like you during the break to think about 2 sequences from the rest of this episode that we haven't talked about that you want to bring up, and we'll just kind of go from there. I'm Dan Zare, and this is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
We are back talking about the 4th episode of Andor. This is called Aldhani, and we're having it's been a great conversation with the 2 of you, and I knew that it would be because you've got so many great perspectives. Because in the interest of time, we're just going to talk about maybe 2 highlights for for all 3 of us that stand out for the second half of this episode. And Jeff, we'll start with you. Why don't you just give one? Well, do you want to just give both, and we'll just kind of hit it? Maybe we'll just do it that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So the first one I wanted to mention was the scene in Mon Mothma's home with her husband, who is a real jerk. This whole thing, it's very very current. It feels very current events because you've got one person who's very socially conscious and one who doesn't really care about it. It seems about anything political, and I thought that was a really nice scene, and it showed that. She's risking more than just her career. She's in this, and it's at the expense of even her marriage and her relationship. But one other thing in that, did anybody notice the reference to Sly Moore was mentioned, which is a character from the comics? Love it, getting a good comics reference in Star Wars.
And from episodes 1 and 2.
Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting that Sly Moore was in episodes 1 and 2 as well. I'm obviously more focused on the comics because of Star Wars Splash Page, the podcast about Star Wars comics. And the other one that I wanted to mention was the scene between Major, I'm going to call him Partagas, with the 2 bureaucrats, with Deidre and the other gentleman. And when the other guy leaves and he's just talking to her, at one point he says, that's why we've been promoting officers like you. What do you guys think he meant by that? Officers like you, females or what?
No. The Empire, for all of its oppressive nature, it doesn't appear to see gender, at least in this series so far.
Right.
No,
I agree.
I think it means intelligent up-and-comers that will crawl over people for the glory of the Empire. That's what I think it means.
Okay. All right. That was just the one question I had when he said it. I was like, I wonder what that is supposed to mean, and I wonder if we'll learn more about what that does mean as the series goes on.
Right. I love that. So Tom, what are your 2?
So my 2 are I've already kind of mentioned one of them, but it's when Mon Mothma goes to the antiquities shop, and it just gives a full feel of her connection. So we wonder how does she become connected with rebellion? Clearly she sympathizes with them, but how does she become a part of that and the leadership of that? And I think this is how it happens. And it kind of goes back to that secrecy moment. And I remember watching it thinking, it was in my second viewing of this episode where I was like, this scene just seems so important to me. For so many reasons, and it's the questioning of everything, and it is the game, the ploy that's going on, and I love through cinematography the wonderful eye shifts of everybody, from the driver to Lathan's assistant to his own and Mothma's own, just sort of. I swear everybody gets an eye shift from one side to the other somewhere in that scene. But just the play and the interplay between Mothma and Luthen, and when he takes her in back and he's doing the big part, and then he brings it down and he says, look, I need to know if, whatever the answer is, whatever, but I need to know because we're struggling. I need to, he needs to move on. And they have that really frank conversation that I don't feel like really ever has resolution. But then they, he sends her on her way with the artifact, and I'm like, wow, that was really well played. Visually, it was fascinating. Story and writing, it really worked for me and told me exactly what I was supposed to get from it. So I thought that was exquisite. And then my second one is really not even a scene at all, but it's the first notes at the conclusion. It's the first notes of music at the conclusion of the scene of the episode. I've always loved this in Star Wars, especially in like the Clone Wars or in late episodes of the Rebels, where something dramatic happens or the episode just drops and then you go to the credits. But it's always those first notes of the closing credit music that just bring like chills and raise the little hairs on my arms. And this one just did it for me because it establishes the drama of what's happening. It establishes the tension that, look, you're going to eat, you're going to get your wounds tended, and you're going to learn that tonight. And it's like, or we die. And so, but then the music settles in and you just, the end of episode 3, the end of this episode, when that music hits, I just sit back and I try to reflect on it. I try to let it sink in. And I went back and kind of skipped through the episode, and there's really not much music in this at all. And so anywhere there is music, it is really an emotional piece or something that needs to really set serious tone, because it's really quite vacant of anything other than dialogue and background noise. So those are my 2 items.
I especially like the music. I especially like the music at the end of the scene in the shop, in Lucen's shop, when she walks out to her car. The music there, the music cue there, it's almost synth poppy, but it's not out of place. I really, really liked it. I had a special note about that as well.
When Luthen and Mon Mothma have their conversation, that I agree is not really resolved, but it is resolved. They seem to understand each other quite well. That's an honorable mention for me. But one of the ones that is the actual, I think one of the main reasons why Luthen is my favorite character in the series, Jeff alluded to earlier on, and that is when he's in the ship, he's going to Coruscant, and he changes. He puts on this like hot towel on his face. He puts on a wig. He very poignantly and purposefully and deliberately puts on every ring individually. He changes his posture and he practices these smiles, and then he straightens up again and he walks straight. It kind of reminded me of Christopher Reeve, how he would change his posture from Clark Kent to Superman. Very distinct, different personalities, and it's terrific acting. And I saw somebody on Twitter saying, find somebody who loves you the way that Diego Luna looks at Stellan Skarsgård. And you can see why. It's a master class in acting. It's just terrific. And I think it says a lot about this guy. I trust him completely. You mentioned earlier, Tom, you're not sure what to think. Is he? I trust him completely. He just seems to have the best of intentions in the worst of times, and I think that's maybe one of the best ways I can think to describe it.
Nice, I like that.
Quickly.
Yeah, that's good.
And the other one for me is the sequence that you also alluded to, Jeff, but just a little bit ago, and that is when Mon Mothma goes home and she has some really serious conflict with her husband. I watched the sequence a number of times, and I think there's a lot to sort of digest. It's quite delectable. And not only is it in a dining room without food, but there's a relationship without love. And that's interesting, because this is a room, a place in the home where you're supposed to be nourished and come together through Thanksgiving, through appreciation, through breaking bread. And there's nothing there that's been broken except for a marriage. It seems that way anyway. And what I think is fascinating about it is that it's hard to tell if he's a complete jerk or he's completely selfish and absolutely clueless. And the way that she is hurt by it makes me think that he's a little bit of both. I don't know if he quite realizes that his wife's life is at stake, or maybe he's an Imperial sympathizer. He must be if he's buddies with Sly Moore. So I don't know. But when I first had the good fortune to see this, this was my one of my favorite sequences in the first 4 episodes because of the drama played out here. And I keep mentioning Tolstoy, but this little conversation between husband and wife, love that's gone wrong, is very Shakespearean to me. So it's checking all the boxes for me, not as a parent, but as a teacher of literature and a lover of well-told drama. I think this is an absolute grand slam.
And I think her husband is. I don't know that he's necessarily an Imperial sympathizer, but I think he's just very comfortable, and he doesn't have a whole lot of empathy for anyone who's not in his position. I think that's
Agreed.
What it boils down to. And in Luthen's shop, did you guys notice in the background there looked to be a Darth Vader samurai costume in the back, like a wicker Darth Vader helmet?
I saw something similar, yeah, and I couldn't quite place it. I mean, whether
that's what I thought of immediately. The samurai Darth Vader that you can see that the toy maker, the customizer, did several years ago.
That's great. That's great. Well, gentlemen, before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to bring up that we left out, Tom?
I guess to me, I don't know. I may be the only one, but I doubt. I can't think I would be. But I am seeing so much of Rebels and Solo and Bad Batch and all of that sort of tying in through all of these. And there's some streams and threads of story. And not saying they're replicating anything by any means, no. But I feel like the times in all of those stories, we can see the times are changing and the time and characters and people developing as heroes or victims in this. And I'm really, really enjoying that. And so I guess that's my final thought.
Great. Mr. McGee, what about you?
My final thoughts are not nearly that deep. One, cleanish shaven Andor looks really weird. And 2, they made Coruscant look like a real place. Yeah. Love the prequels, hate the prequels. Coruscant didn't really look that real to me. This one, and maybe it was because we were on like a street level, looked like a real place. And I think I loved that.
Yeah, the production value here is tremendous. It's what Lucasfilm is known for. It's live action, practical sets, and digital sets, real places, real locations. It's tremendous. It's really fantastic. I haven't been super chatty on Twitter about this because I always try to save my conversations for the podcast, but there's just so much to dine on here. This is a feast. This is an absolute feast. Now, do I want every Star Wars series in the future to be like this? No, I don't. But I also have only seen 4 episodes, and we've got 8 more left in season 1, and we've got 12 episodes of season 2, which they're just starting to film. So there's going to be a lot of Andor to talk about, and hopefully I'll get to talk about it again with the 2 of you fine fellows. Thank you both so much for being back on Coffee with Kenobi. Jeff, please let everybody know where they can find not only you, but all of your great work.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at @TheJeffMcGee. That's my personal Twitter account. Marvin Dog Media carries all of my podcasts, Talking Toys with Taylor and Jeff, the pilot episode, which is about television, Saturday Morning Supercast, which is about Saturday morning cartoons and breakfast cereal. And you can also find me once a week on Star Wars Splash Page discussing that week's Marvel and Dark Horse Comics, Star Wars comics releases with our buddy Matt Moore.
The Mr. Matt Moore, who we know and love. That's right.
Absolutely. And
Taylor's not too bad either.
Taylor's awesome.
He is awesome. I miss chatting with the 2 of you about G.I. Joe. That's always a blast.
We're working on it. We got Wave 5 coming up. We're just working on scheduling.
Of course. Well, I will tell my secretary to be on the lookout for that call. That will be fun.
Your secretary sounds an awful lot like you, Dan. I'm just
it is.
Put that out there.
It is. Okay. Not only is there duality in Andor, but it's also in my psyche as well. It's a good sign. It's a good sign. All right, Tom, what about you? Tell us about Teachers in the Dungeon and where we can find you and all your great work.
Yeah.
And of course, your blog too, by the way.
Well, yes. So on Twitter, for me, you can catch me on Twitter at Draftline, and that's where you can see I post anytime I post anything new in my blog, Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy. So check out my thoughts there, I suppose. And on and my podcast, Teachers in the Dungeon, that I host with Dan Ream, is a Dungeons and Dragons adventure podcast. So if you love the adventures of fantasy, sci-fi, and Star Wars, you might enjoy the adventures in Teachers in the Dungeon as well. More Dungeons and Dragons adventures and conversations. And we talked to wonderful people like Dan Zare and Corey Clubb in a recent episode, but other contributors to the Dungeons and Dragons world as well. So yeah, thank you.
You bet. I was just going to say, Corey and I were just on for a special 2-part episode. The time of this recording, part 1 has come out. Part 2 is not dropped yet, where we reminisce about some great moments when we all sat at the Dungeons and Dragons table together. Well, gentlemen, thank you both again so much for joining me and breaking down the 4th episode of Andor.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here.